Is my audio coming?
Right.
My audio coming through okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, excellent. All right, well, good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a good 4th of July. Let's go ahead and get started. I think first thing up on the agenda is reviewing the minutes or meeting summary from our June 15th meeting.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we normally just do public comment if anyone does have
right.
anything. But I guess
I don't have anything, and this is Reed.
Oh, hi, Reed.
Good morning.
Morning.
okay, I'll bring up the meeting minutes.
All right, does anybody have any questions, comments, edits for page 1 of the meeting summary? I thought this was a great meeting summary, Simon. Thanks for the comprehensiveness of the capture. Nice job capturing the conversation.
That's okay. It's always tricky getting the right balance between making something that people don't want to read like 15 pages.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Now, the great thing is you can just go look at the recorded Zoom meeting.
Right,
So that's
yeah,
kind of
definitely.
Here's that benefit, yes.
So just page 2.
One minor question on page 3 as you scroll down.
Yeah.
It mentions 2025 town plan. I thought it was 2024, or is it called the 2025?
I think it's 2025, but I will double check that. And I'll adjust it in the meeting minutes if that's correct. So are there any other comments, or should we move on?
I had just one question. I guess you had in, I guess in the section with Brian Forrest asking about the tree warden, you had an action item in there about following up with Chris Dolmer from Milton.
Yep.
I just didn't want to lose that. I'm not sure if you had a chance to do that or not yet, but I just wanted to not lose that.
Eric,
yeah.
This is Laura here. And the reason that was in there is because he was going to be treating ash with Terry and Ethan Tapper, and I was there as well. And so I just was able to chat with him about it and got some information about what he does and how many hours he spends, and that it's a volunteer position.
All right, so that has been done then.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thanks. That's all I have on the minutes.
Right. So I think we just normally do a quick vote on that.
Yeah, so if no one else has any other questions or comments, I guess I'll call for a vote to approve the minutes from June 15th.
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
And, second from, so that was a motion from Reed, I believe, and a second from Kim.
Yep.
Any discussion on the motion? All right. I'm not hearing any. I guess call for a vote to approve. I'll signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right. There you go, Simon. Minutes from June 15th have been approved. Thanks. All right, next on our agenda is an update from Ethan Tapper on Catamount Community Forest. Ethan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. So I've been spending a lot of time at Catamount, mostly with Terry and Laura. We've been treating some ash trees, which is pretty cool. If you haven't been there, in the sort of northeastern portion of Catamount, there is a big ash tree that Jim McCullough was very attached to. It's a really cool, big, old tree. And Jim was, for, I don't know, a couple of years now, Jim was like very excited to get that ash tree protected from emerald ash borer. And so we treated that tree and also 10 others with triage, which is a chemical, emamectin benzoate, through a stem injection treatment. The Vermont Land Trust was able to, they gave us their ash injection system. And so we were able to perform that treatment essentially at cost. And Laura was with us primarily because she's a licensed pesticide applicator, which you need to be to apply pesticides on someone else's land beside your own land. And so the idea is that Laura could, if I couldn't do it, Laura could complete that treatment in the future. It's just something that needs to be repeated every 3 years. And so those, you know, it was actually sort of fortuitous or pretentious in a way, because Chris Dolmer, who was mentioned earlier in this meeting, actually discovered the emerald ash borer at Taft's Corners like the day before the first day we met out there to do treatment. So there is a known infestation in Williston. It's by the Best Buy. And yeah, so it's a really good time to do it. We don't know exactly when emerald ash borer will be at Catamount. It's possible it could already be there and we don't know about it. But it's just good to get those trees treated to protect them in the future. We're calling that big tree Big Jim, by the way. That's Big Jim is the locus of our ash treatment area. So the idea of ash treatment is there are ecological reasons why we're doing that. So the ecological reasons are to preserve ash on the landscape. You know, there are different species that are associated with ash, and to try and, you know, in a time when we expect there to be very few ash on the landscape pretty soon, providing habitat for those species. Also to provide a seed source, so to allow ash to reproduce, produce future generations of ash that we hope will be the future of ash on the landscape, should those future generations exhibit some form of genetic resistance to emerald ash borer, which is discovered in very low levels in areas that have been infested for a long time, like 0.5%. And or if we were to develop a biocontrol or some other way of controlling emerald ash borer, the progeny of those trees could be the future of ash on our landscape. And it's just really important that we protect all of our species, you know, that we protect biodiversity. And again, like, protecting ash trees is not just about protecting ash itself, which is really important. It's also about protecting the many species that are co-evolved with ash and adapted to ash, you know, and have been for thousands of years. So that's what we've been doing recently. The big project that's coming up for Catamount, which will be happening, fingers crossed, next year, starting in late August 2023, will be a forest management project. So Tony D'Amato, Gary Hawley, and some other forestry professors from the University of Vermont, and both of those guys, by the way, are Williston residents as well. They have hooked us up with this project called Adaptive Silviculture for Climate Change. Silviculture is just managing, just a fancy word for that. The textbook definition is the art and the science of tending the forest. And Adaptive Silviculture for Climate Change is a project that basically is trying to provide insight on how we manage forests in the context of climate change. So it's a nationwide program, and there will be little ASCC like demonstration forests all over the place, North America. And the work, we'll involve cutting trees. So we'll be using like logging as a tool to manage the forest, but it will also involve a lot of other things. So there'll be like underplanting species, and they'll be doing surveys of birds and which bird species, how the abundance of different bird species changes over time in relation to that forest management work, and a bunch of other stuff. It's really cool and really exciting. It's also a little daunting, just because it is, you know, obviously Catamount is widely used and widely loved, and this is going to really change the way that about 30 acres in the northwestern part of Catamount looks. And it will ultimately lead to more diversity and more habitat and all these good things. But, you know, in the short term, forest management can be really jarring. So how we're going to address this is by like going way overboard with education and outreach. The first step in this, so we're like more than a year before this work is going to begin. The first step in this is we're actually putting up permanent educational signage about the project like now. So we actually have ordered those signs. I created I think 8 signs that will talk about different aspects of the work we're doing, why we're doing it, provide QR code links to different resources about it. And we're going to put that all throughout the area that's going to be managed, so that as people are riding their bikes through there, or walking through there, running through there, or whatever, they see these signs and they're like, oh, something's about to happen. One thing I've learned is that people do not like to be surprised about this kind of stuff. And we want to demonstrate that this is something that we're approaching in like this really thoughtful way. We're going to couple that with educational events, probably virtual and in-person events over the next year, where we'll talk about, you know, what's going to happen, what it's going to look like, what to expect, and just give people, I think about it as giving people a lot of tools to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So that's going to be, you know, a big lift for me. It's sort of a double-edged sword when you're working in a place like Catamount, because the challenging part is that, again, it's like people know and love this place. And so when you change it, it's very tough for people to deal with. The benefit, though, is that this work is something that we can really be proud of and has a lot of benefits. And so when you do it in a place that's more visible, you get more eyes on it, and you hopefully can educate more people about how forests work and what good forest management is and what it looks like and stuff like that. So it's a little bit like this. I should say that there are actually 2 parts to this project. So because it's you know, we're approaching it with this sort of scientific methodology, it's paired. So we'll be doing this work on 30 acres in the northwest of Catamount. And we've also talked to UVM about using Catamount to access their parcel that they call Talcott Woods, which is south of Catamount. So going through those fields to the south of Governor Chittenden Road and establishing a log landing in those fields so that we can access this area that's very similar to the area we're managing at Catamount in Talcott. So there's 2 parts to that. Our rationale for doing it in the summer is that we want to create conditions where we can regenerate certain species, especially white pine and oak. And to get those species, we really need to what's called scarify the soil. So we need to churn up those just like top couple inches of soil, expose some topsoil, simulating basically like a natural disturbance where trees fall over and they tip up those root balls and they expose mineral soil underneath, or a ground fire, a forest fire, which burns off that top layer of soil and exposes the mineral soil. So yeah, so that's why we're doing it in the summer. That provides, you know, still more challenges, but you know, that doesn't mean that we can't do it. It just means that we really need to be careful and thoughtful about it. So that's number 2, and I'm sure you'll be hearing about that. And then the last thing, and I totally want to hear your questions as well. The last thing that I'll mention is that in spending a lot of time at Catamount this summer and spring, it's also come to my attention that we have I knew this, but it is really stuck out at me, how we have a really advanced infestation of some of these invasive plants, especially buckthorn, but also Japanese barberry and shrub honeysuckle, and we need help. Like it's not really bad everywhere, but it is a little bad in most places, and it is really bad in some places. Laura especially has done an awesome job organizing volunteers, and Laura and Chapin have like become licensed pesticide applicators so that we can treat some of those plants with herbicide, which is really what we need to do at the level they're at now. But we also probably need like professional help. We need to get funding to hire professional invasive plant control companies to to deal with some of these really dense areas, especially in the area that's mapped in the forest management plan as stand 5, which is sort of this younger stand, in the southern portion of the section of Catamount north of Bedfordshire. So those are my 3 things about Catamount, and I'm sure that there are a lot of questions about all of those things.
Thanks, Ethan. We'll make sure that the big Jim gets recorded in the minutes, and then that name will be forever memorialized as.
Yeah.
as
Oh, yeah. And the
Jim's
last thing
tree.
I didn't mention about Big Jim and about his buddies that we treated is that the other thing I'm thinking about, with wanting to treat this little cluster of trees is that it might be, in 10 years and 15 years, there might not be a whole lot of places that a person could go to see living ash trees on our landscape. And so to have them like all in that area is also important, like, to bring people out to and be like, yeah, this is what living adult ash trees look like. So there's like a cultural benefit.
Yeah, that's a great point. Similar to, the elms, can't find any adult elms anymore.
Are there any black ash?
We didn't find any. There probably are. I think at Catamount there probably are some green ash and some black ash somewhere, but I haven't found any.
Cool.
Any other questions from folks?
This is Laura here. I just wanted to ask what next steps are, Terry. This question is for you. To get professional help with the invasives, do you need to make sure that that is in the budget for next year?
So yeah, we did not anticipate that we really needed the funds to do professional control of the invasives. So as it stands now, we don't have a whole lot of money set aside for treatment of invasives. There might be the whole, but I think it's $2,000 for the whole, Catamount. So that's already set. So we probably need to try to reach out to look for some grants for some money, or the town, if the town is willing to, give us money, or there is the stewardship fund, which I'm not sure exactly how that works. So maybe Simon can help us out there, because I guess it's a bit of a process to, you have to go to the select board and I guess make a proposal to use some of that money from the stewardship fund. But I think that would be a good use of the stewardship fund, because it is such an issue.
And
Yeah, you're right. It would
I would
expect
say the
something.
last source of funding that's potential is revenue that we're going to earn from that forest management project.
What do you anticipate that might be? Like, do you think it would be sufficient to do some treatment?
It'll depend. I think so. One thing that I'm a little bit nervous about is that a lot of the forest management trails, skid roads, skid trails on Catamount have been really upgraded. They put down geotextile fabric and pea gravel, and we have the town has a lease with Catamount Outdoor Family Center that if we do, if we mess up those trails at all, that we have to pay for them to be fixed. So that could like easily suck away all that money. Although I understand that there is some money that we're sort of holding in reserve for that purpose. And so that's, it'll depend. What I'm gonna do this summer, maybe this winter, is I don't normally do this, but I'm actually gonna mark and tally the trees that we're gonna cut. So normally I would just mark a tree to be cut, and just as they get cut and they get sent to the mill, we have an agreement with the logger where they like pay us X dollars per unit volume. Instead of doing that, I think what I'm gonna do is, as I mark each individual tree, I'm gonna tally the volume in that tree. And then we are going to have an exact dollar amount, or we're gonna have an exact volume amount of like how much wood we're cutting. And then we'll put it out to different contractors as a lump sum. So then we'll know exactly how much. They'll be like, we're gonna give, I'll be like, there is X number of thousands of board feet of timber that we're gonna cut, and they'll be like, okay, we're gonna give you this amount of money. It is a really good time to be cutting white pine. The markets are very strong for that right now. But it remains to be seen. It's a little bit of a fussy project, but it'll be let's say it'll be more than $10,000, and it will be less than $50,000. We will know, hopefully we will know by next summer exactly how much.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't want us to be waiting for that money to deal with this invasive problem. And I want to be cognizant of the fact that, it is very possible that a lot of that money could get sucked away into trail restoration. I don't think we're going to cause a lot of damage to the trail, but those trails are like really, really improved. And so Catamount might ask us to do some really extensive work, even if they're just like a little bit.
Right.
So Ethan, I have a question on the improved road. Is that mostly what Velco did just up to the power lines?
No, I'm talking about like Woods Trace and Sandman.
Oh, so Sandman has had a lot of update.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're both, all those, they're basically like adaptive, handicapped, accessible recreational trails.
And did you talked the other day about using someone with a forwarder?
Yep, yeah, so there is a system. There's not very many people that have this equipment, but there is a system called a forwarder where instead of dragging trees on the trail, they're like carrying them with wheels. And I think that would probably be an appropriate equipment mix that would really limit our exposure to any damage to those trails.
All right. Questions for you too, Ethan. Well, first of all, the 10 to 50,000. Actually, I think that's actually a pretty reasonable ballpark to work with. So that's useful to know. We'll see what when it gets to the point of getting quotes for the potential treatment, how that shakes out. But so on the research project, maybe I missed it. So you said it starts next year. How long is the program run?
I think that in terms of how long they're monitoring things within that area, it's indefinite.
Oh, okay.
And they've actually already started sampling. They started sampling last year.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Sounds like a pretty neat project. I lost it. Any other questions for Ethan?
I guess just what do you feel like you need from us in terms of the outreach and education around that project? Like, I mean, you alluded to this when you said it's going to be a big lift, but it could be a huge lift, right? Like managing all of the public feedback, especially if people are upset or have lots of questions. And so what do you want our role to be, or what do you think you need from us in order to do a great job? Because I think we want to do great outreach and education, right? But also I think we should all be mindful that like there could be a controversy. People get upset about cutting trees.
Yeah.
So how do we sort of like proactively address that?
I would love if folks from this committee had like thoughts and ideas about how to reach people in an effective way, in different ways to engage different groups of people from Williston, right? Because I don't want it to be one of those things where, it is important that people feel like they've had a chance to give input on something or to learn about something. But for me, that's not what I want. I want people to actually have input and to actually learn about it. And one thing I've learned about doing this outreach is that like the way you present it, where and how you present it is really important. And so obviously, I'll be doing outreach not just to Williston, but to the broader community. But if anybody has like creative ideas about how to engage people in Williston, specifically. And I've done this in the past through, I have a YouTube channel, make like videos. I've done blogs. I write articles in local community newspapers. I do in-person events and virtual events. And sort of take these events and frame them in different ways. You know, like I learned that if you're just like, hey, let's go check out a forest management project, you get a few people.
Right.
But if you say, hey, let's talk about wildlife and how forest management and wildlife get along and how this work will impact and benefit, you know, different species, then you get a lot more people. Or if you talk about forest birds, or if you talk about climate mitigation and managing forests for climate resilience and adaptation, you know, the way that you frame these things is important. And you all know the Williston community better than I do. So I would really be interested in thinking about how we engage folks as we lead up to the project.
Let's do a mountain bike thing. Like, let's
Great
do
idea.
like you and I should talk about like leading a bike ride with the mountain bike community or a stop. And you could do like a Nordic one too. Cause I think those are the two groups that are going to be like, my playground, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And once we have these signs up too, which hopefully we'll have up this month, we'll have like little stops on a tour
Yeah.
that we can go on. So we could like, you know, bike through that area and stop at each
Mhm.
one of those signs and talk about it. I think that's a
Yeah.
great idea.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
So
Great
something
point.
else, Ethan, that I can do is that the guys here, when they were recently doing the TAF Corners form-based code, did a lot of outreach for that. So I'll get some feedback from them about what they felt was like, what worked really well with the people of Williston and what, you know, perhaps could have been done differently, and see if we can use that experience. And I know Emily, who works in our office, is in the middle of doing a consultation on the changes to the village bylaw. So she's been doing sort of a lot of interactive stuff, you know, self-guided walking tours of the village to get feedback. So there might be some opportunities there.
That'd be great.
Yeah. And then also, I guess one of the key things is developing a list of FAQs for the guys at the hub who might not really fully understand what's going on, but maybe the guys who
Mhm.
get it in the neck from people who are turning up. So that, you know, just
Yeah, I
a
should
bit detailed, but yeah.
created some when Terry and I tabled there at that what do we call it? The National Day thing. And I created these like these flyers. They're like big, they're 11 by 17, and they have information and links about the project. And I should probably leave a pile of those at the hub. So
We
that
could
people-
also maybe laminate one and put that on the side of the barn.
Definitely, that's a great idea.
Similar to Simon's suggestion, I think interactive maps in the past have gotten a different crowd of people who want to be able to click on and type their stuff and read about the different areas. And some folks, I don't visit Catamount very often, so some folks like me would benefit from actually learning about the layout and where the project is taking place through maps.
What platform did you use for that, Reed?
I don't know which one we used when they were working on connectivity in the TAF Corners area. There was interactive maps where you could type in, this is an area where it's easy to bike or hard to bike or easy to walk or cross roads, that type of thing. I don't know what technology it was, but we can find out from staff.
Yeah.
One important point that I think it would be great for you to tell us if this is true, Ethan, is that like, because this is a research project and it's part of a national program, I'm guessing, it'd be cool if Gary was here, too bad he's not. I'm guessing that there's not like a lot of flexibility for people to give input and then have it be incorporated into the project. Is that true? And so I think we want to be really careful that we don't suggest that might be the case and then have it not be the case, because then it's contributing to what Ethan said of people being like, I didn't actually have agency in this, right? And feeling bad about it. So that's not to say that people shouldn't be able to like write on the map like Reed was suggesting, but just like, let's not make it seem like folks have the ability to shape this in one way or the other if there's not actually that flexibility in the project.
Right, they can't, so the things that we cannot change are where it's happening, or like the substance, of what we're doing. Like we can't change like the silviculture. We can't change, we can't change like if we're going to create gaps, and if we're going to, like all that stuff we can't. But they can have input on other aspects of it, like how we manage it from a recreational perspective, and from a public perspective, how we treat the trails and stuff like that. We're trying to keep Catamount, that north side of Catamount, as open as possible. We're talking about closing 30 acres of a almost 400 acre piece of land. But we're trying to see if there are ways to like lessen the inconvenience of it. And that, that would be really, really helpful. And people can also have input about, just stuff they want to know more about, I guess.
All right, so I did think of the other question I was going to ask you, Ethan. So like I said to you, the Talcott site, is that going to be like a control against the site in Catamount?
It's not a control. There's actually, within the northern section of Catamount, we have a control. If you go up, so I get the trails mixed up, but if you go straight out past the beaver pond and straight through this kind of unhealthy young pine stand, and then there's like a T.
Yep.
If you go to the right, there's like a little bridge, and to the left of that is and across that bridge is an area that was managed, in quotes, in 2016, and then but to the left of that is an area that was not managed, and that's our control for that side. I think the purpose of Talcott, they would call it pairing, so they're just like taking two separate sites and managing the same way. And then at Talcott, I believe they also have another section that they'll treat as a control.
Cool. And then switching back to the invasive species management, do you know of any sources of funds that the town could consider applying to for grants to support professional invasive species management control?
It's tough because on private lands, most of the work I do is with private landowners, and there are funds through a federal program called EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which is administered through the NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is a part of the USDA. So it's a federal funds that can be given to landowners to treat invasive plants on their private lands. Those funds are not available to public lands. We were able to get some funding for invasive species treatment in conjunction with that wildlife habitat work that we did in early 2021. That you can see, like if you go up that road I was talking about on your left, that area looks like a big old mess that has a sign on it. We were able to get funding from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for invasive species treatment, but only as a part of this broader wildlife habitat management objective. So it's unlikely that we're going to be able to get funding for like a standalone invasives control project. Or I don't know where that funding would come from. One thing that we could also think about though is that there is a stewardship fund. There is funds that exist from the town. And maybe if there might be grant funding that we can get for other stuff, that would be a potential place where those funds should go. So get grant funding for, like the restoration of the barn and like, other stuff that we might be holding those funds in reserve for, so that we can then take that funding and use it towards invasive species control and not have to worry that we're taking it away from something else.
This would be like a huge, it would have to be bigger than this, but I'll just say that, so U.S. Forest Service, state and private forestry has these like landscape level restoration grants. I got one for the Altona Flat Rock which is, this globally rare ecosystem that's fire prone. So it has to be like bigger than, they would never give us money to just do invasive treatment at Catamount, but if there was some way to like link Catamount to a broader landscape and then do restoration work across that landscape and demonstrate the significance as wildlife corridor, blah, 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 all the words. Maybe that would be something to look at. I think it would have to be more ambitious. Like we'd have to like couch it in a more ambitious project and really demonstrate the significance of that location. Most of them, I think, are being awarded to fire at this point, but I don't know. It's worth looking at. I can send it to you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we need to think about the invasives at Catamount, like short-term, long-term. So short-term, in the next couple of years, like we need to get right on it because they grow exponentially. There's an area that Laura and I looked at last year that was like, I remember walking out there and it was, like 100-foot long area and there were 4 barberry bushes. And then we went out there and looked at it last year and it was a continuous hedge of barberry that was 100 feet long and 8 feet wide. So, it only gets harder and more expensive. So, we should look at these long-term solutions because this is something we're going to have to be dealing with in Catamount long-term, and then also, which is, grants like that would be a huge asset. And then we also need to think about in the short term what we're going to do about it to sort of prevent it getting even worse. And as far as funding, like we could spend a lot of money on it. I mean, it could be, if we spent $20,000 on it this year, we would make a pretty good dent, but that wouldn't be the end of it. It wouldn't be, the problem wouldn't be solved.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's way beyond what a volunteer could do, volunteer groups.
Now that said, like the work that we've done with volunteers, with the Boy Scouts and stuff, have been really helpful, and those are more valuable in a lot of ways. You don't get as much work done as you do with a contractor, but it is also really important that we help people understand, what these species are, why they're a problem, and how we deal with them. Some of the compromises we need to make, like using herbicide, and why we would ever do that. And helping people understand sort of that dynamic, but probably like volunteer groups they're not going to have enough of an impact to address the problem as a whole. So I would say like we still want to do the volunteer stuff, and we also need to think about where we need to bring in professionals.
Awesome, thanks, Ethan. This has been another really great, informative, and engaging conversation with you as always. So thanks for taking the time to come in. We need to transition to our next agenda item. But sorry you had to be in the meeting room all on your own.
This is great. I feel like the chairman of the board in here.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thanks,
Okay,
Ethan.
so
Thanks, Ethan.
I guess I'll unless there's something that I should stick around for, which I'm happy to do. I'll take off, but if folks can follow up with me with any ideas that you have, I'm easy to get a hold of. Just search for Chittenden County Forester or Ethan Tapper, and my email address is just ethan.tapper@vermont.gov.
Awesome.
All right.
Is there anything, Laura, is there anything you want me to stick around for?
No, I don't think so. I did want to just say that I will be running those invasive workshops at Catamount this fall again.
Yay. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
And yeah, and Laura, please do, when you schedule those, please do let me know because I'll participate if I can.
Of course. Thank you very much.
All right, great. Thanks, Ethan.
Thanks,
Everybody.
Ethan.
All right, so our next agenda item is discretionary permit review for the Essex Alliance Church. We have a couple of folks on the call here for that. See Andy and Dan from TEC, and Chris Snyder is the applicant. So this one went through the Conservation Commission and pre-app last summer, and the applicant addressed a few of the comments from the Conservation Commission. And I think I'm gonna stop mumbling and turn it over to the applicant to bring us all up to speed on what's new in the project.
So Chris and Dan, I think normally we just do a sort of short run through from the applicant. Do you guys, I can make you a co-host if you want to share the PDFs, if that works for you, and you can talk to that.
Sure.
I
Dave,
do.
go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, I don't have the PDFs on the computer right now. I'm
Yep.
on a separate computer, so I
Okay.
don't
I can-
have those. But I'm not sure if you have the packet in front of you or if you have the submission.
Yeah, I can share them,
could
no problem.
kind
Okay.
of talk you through it.
So I'll step in and just do a little bit of a general overview for the commission. And first off, thank you very much for your time to review this application for the property, the Essex Alliance Church property. Just so you, as you guys have known, we submitted this for pre-app, I guess, last fall, August. In August, September, it was reviewed. And then we were waiting for the growth allocation process to happen through the design review board, and that we did receive growth allocation for a substantial portion of the proposed neighborhood. And really that amount of growth allocation has defined what we're actually breaking up into 2 phases. And so we do have 2 phases on the overall property. Essentially all of the roads except for the crossroad, which is in between Alpine Drive and Beaudry Lane. Everything else is being permitted within phase 1. The other components within phase 1 are, so along Alpine Drive, we have 2 apartment buildings. We have a group of rear-loaded townhomes, carriage homes along the eastern boundary line, and some duplexes along the northern road line. The interior portion of the property, where we're showing in between Beaudry and Alpine, really is phase 2. The only difference, and we've talked about this last night at both at the hack and talking about it now, is that in our initial application, we have the bike path being constructed within phase 1, crossing between Beaudry Lane over to Alpine. And what we've decided to do is to incorporate the park at the same time, which is the area that is in the center of the property. And the bike path, that's the park area, that is an upland area. And the bike path is really, minimizing our impact to buffers and wetland crossings. And so that's why it squiggles all the way around. But our plan is to also incorporate the park area into phase 1. This specific application, we have just presented full architectural plans for all of the homes that are within phase 1, and some concept plans for phase 2. We did, it's a bit of an odd scenario in that all of phase 1 is being considered under the existing regulations, and then phase 2 is most likely going to be considered under form-based code. So we had to sort of plan how phase 2 would work. understanding what the draft form-based code was or could be. We don't really know. We have incorporated some of those features into the phase 2. There are still some other changes to be worked through, and it is being considered by the select board to remove this property from the form-based code district. And I only bring that up because it is being considered. And, you know, the primary request for that is that we think that the architectural details may change more than what people want within the same street section. And so we kind of just wanted to keep that as an option, and they are considering it. In terms of, you know, the overall project, you can see where we're proposing to put the homes in the Allen Brook corridor. And maybe I'll let Dan talk a little bit more about the details along in that area.
Yeah, so from an environmental perspective, there is a mapped habitat block in the northeastern portion of the parcel. It more or less follows the top of bank along the Allen Brook corridor, which is roughly the existing tree line up there. We do not have any impacts within that 150-foot setback from Allen Brook, with the exception of one storm outfall, and that's located at the northwest portion of the site near the proposed bike path along Beaudry Lane. We are going to outfall in there, and then everything will be restored once that outfall is constructed. The actual stormwater system itself, it's a gravel wetland that is outside of the 150-foot setback. However, the outfall pipe does outfall within that setback, and that is due to the elevation change in the grades that we needed to detain that 100-year storm event and get that volume in that area.
Dan, that outfall, is that the overflow from the stormwater retention ponds or the gravel wetlands, sorry, or is that draining the impervious area?
Well, it's not, it's the outfall pipe. So it would convey the water quality storm event, the 1-year storm event, 10-year, up until the 100-year storm event. So it's not necessarily an overflow for larger storm events. It would still be conveying runoff from those smaller storm events too. And we are going to, I think we have a detail on the plan. We'll add it to the plan view too, but we are going to stabilize that embankment downstream of that outfall pipe with riprap as part of the proposal to make sure there's no erosion occurring on that embankment. So that is the only impact within the 150-foot setback. There are some, as Chris mentioned, wetlands on site. There's a large class 2 complex kind of in the western portion of the site where that proposed rec path's going through. We have designed that rec path to cross the wetland at the narrowest point to minimize direct wetland impacts, and kind of following that upland area where that future park is going to be. There are also 2 smaller class 3 wetlands located in the southern portion of the site as well. And we're currently working with our wetlands consultant in looking through the Conservation Committee notes. I did see there was a recommendation on providing a functional assessment of those class 3 wetlands on the property. So we are working with our wetlands consultant on getting that functional assessment. We were, I guess he's out of town, so he couldn't get that to us in time for this meeting, but we will get that to the town. And really all I have from an environmental wetlands habitat perspective.
Did I read in the plan there that bike path was going to be paved, or is that going to be a gravel?
We were proposing for it to be paved.
Would it be a little less impact if it was a gravel bike path?
I think it would be. The question I think that a bunch of people from the town have asked us is there's a bridge to nowhere right now. And the bridge is paved over the Allen Brook and it ends on the western portion of this property, or northwestern portion of the property. And so, you know, I would assume that the town and everybody else would want to have it paved through the, you know, through the property to connect over to the path in Finney Crossing. We certainly could consider it, but I would think that, you know, some people are going to say they want that paved because the other sections are paved.
I just thought since it was going through a class 2 wetlands, might be a little less impact, but
Yeah,
it makes
I
sense.
don't, yeah, I understand your thoughts, Terry, but for something like this, I actually almost feel like a paved path would be potentially less impactful. With the gravel, you end up with erosion of the gravel and whatever's in the gravel ends up getting washed in the wetland, and
Yeah.
there's some trade-offs for sure. You know, depending on what type of sealants, if there's coal tar sealants that are used, hopefully not. But I think consistency with the rest of the path would probably, in my opinion, be better.
Right. It'd probably be good to keep it consistent with the rest of the path.
Sorry, Dan, do you have more?
That was really it as far as the habitat block and the wetlands impacts on site. I don't know if you want to hop to the recommendations in the staff note, or if the commission had any other questions we could address.
I think it'd be good to take any questions, and then in general, I think we tend to do recommendations at the end. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Sure,
what I
yep.
was going to do, Simon. If there are commission members that have other general questions before we get into the findings and recommendations, we can open the floor for those.
Eric, if I may.
Sorry, Reed, looking at my other monitor for my notes. Go ahead.
No worries. So Dan and Chris, one thing I noticed in the wildlife assessment was a recommendation around providing bird and bat habitat. Do you have any plans to incorporate that within the designs?
Yeah, so we certainly will do that. We haven't included any locations at this time along in the plan. We need a state wetlands permit. Sometimes we demarcate that 50-foot buffer or the impacted area by birdhouses. Right now we're showing a split rail fence, but we could certainly have birdhouses along that buffer area there. I think that would be a good place in the design to incorporate that.
So I just have a question about that too. I wondered who would be responsible for maintenance, monitoring, because it does take a little bit of, you can't just put up a birdhouse and then just walk away. It's good to have somebody monitoring.
Yeah, and maybe Chris, you can tell me if you agree, but I would think that would be the HOA that would be responsible for maintenance on those birdhouses, the homeowners association for the development.
Well, the homeowner association will have permit requirements that they have to follow anyways. And all of the property along that buffer line would be maintained by the association. So it's not maintained by individual owners. So that would be something that they could incorporate.
That's good to know on the homeowners association. So that includes the whole parcel, including the carriage houses that would be along the Allen Brook.
Correct.
So
And
I
we
guess
know
that
that we know that in the history that it's been more challenging when it's individual homeowners to maintain those, and they tend to go do what they want to go do.
Yes.
Versus an HOA, which has a very clear, permit requirements, and they will be maintaining the overall property.
Yeah, that it's good to know. It makes me feel a little bit better too. One of my questions, which was about the very close proximity of those carriage houses on the north side of Brody Lane there, right up against the wetland buffer and mowing into the buffer. And see if they're managed by, I think, carriage houses or townhomes. I guess the townhomes.
It's both. And the one thing is those boxes are boxes that are allow for decks and stairs off decks. And the houses won't go all the way back to that line, but we do have to think about, I've been caught on this before, where we don't have a space for a deck stair. And some of these with the grade changes, we might have a 8-foot set of stairs off of it, and you have to think about what that is. So the house doesn't go all the way back to that line. That is just the building envelope that allows for some of those little pieces that have to go outside of the house. The deck, the little step section of stairs, we've just been, that's been something we've had to come back to and modify in the past.
Yeah. So those boxes are the footprint lots. That's what the landowner will own, that area. So that encompasses, as Chris said, the building, the decks, the stairs, all of that. So the building isn't going to go back that far. That's just depicting the footprint lot, what the future property owner will own.
Okay. And then the wetland buffer line that'll be clear with just the tree, that'll be the tree line, basically. That's how that'll be marked.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I didn't quite hear that.
The edge of the wetland buffer, that'll be marked with signage or with trees. Usually we're looking for something permanent like boulders or trees or whatever, so that people don't end up mowing into the wetland buffer, which is my original concern until I learned that it would be the homeowner association that was maintaining it along.
Yeah. So right now we are showing a split rail fence along the buffer line, the wetland buffer line, that class 2 buffer. And that was the area I was talking about. We could also add perhaps bird feeders in addition to the split rail fence.
Okay. And then, so I don't have, I'm trying to switch back and forth to the site plan Google Maps here. So that will be, and the Google map, that'll be right up against the tree line now. Is that more or less the idea? Is that tree, the tree line that's there? So most of the parcel looks like it's a field, and then the tree line along that, is that the buffer line, more or less?
So what I'm referring to is that class 2 buffer where the rec path or where the recreational path is going over there. The tree line is more or less that 150-foot setback from Allen Brook.
Right, that's what I'm looking at the moment, anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, that tree line roughly follows that 150-foot setback. It jogs in and out in a couple places, but that is roughly the top of bank and 150-foot setback from Allen Brook.
Yeah, so I think, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong. So up here, the tree line follows, the new tree line will follow the 150-foot setback, and then the 150-foot setback is a lot bigger, sorry, a lot further away over here, and it sort of dives off down like that. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
And that's not the existing tree line. That will be there is sort of, I think, this sort of purple diagonal hatching is trees. So there is some pushing the tree line back to make that buffer.
Got it.
There will
Okay.
be some pushing of the tree line back, yes.
Okay. All right, sorry, I was reading that pink line.
There's a lot
incorrectly.
going on the drawings, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, all right, that makes me feel a little bit better then. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Other questions from commission members?
I have a question about the assessed wildlife assessment. And I think I saw in the notes there that it was done mid-April to late April, I think it was. And it was talking about that, maybe, Simon, could you pull that up? Just because I don't have any of my notes or anything here.
You want
Um,
the habitat assessment?
Yeah, and I just have a quick general question. So it's a little bit early in the season for some wildlife. Like I'm just referencing maybe little grassland birds that they're not quite back yet. And it just said that there was no disturbance of wildlife. And I just wonder, it's a little bit early for those, but I understand that that was a field that was mowed by a farmer. Is that correct? So it's probably gets mowed multiple times.
That's correct. It does get
And
it
when
gets
they-
gets
when they
hayed
get
twice a
into-
year, and then the other areas are whatever is not hayable is brush hogged, and has been for probably 15 years.
And would the practice of brush hogging continue if there's any left to be mowed after the development, or would that just be left as fields? Or is that all going to be?
The class 2 wetland and buffer area, I guess we could certainly brush hog that if that was something that people wanted us to do, once a year. I've seen in some cases people want us to brush hog that to minimize the tree growth and allow the grass growth, but we'd be open to having a discussion about that.
Actually, be better for wildlife if it wasn't mowed like every 2 or 3 years. Just if people didn't want to see the trees growing back up, the shrubs. So yeah, and then I just had a question about, so the habitat assessment, does that basically focus on the wildlife that has been documented in Williston? I think there was seven species. Is that correct? I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, so somebody went out from our office. It was in between April 22nd and 29th of this year, and they performed the habitat assessment, looking at the natural vegetation on site as well as some wildlife. And on page 1 of that habitat assessment, they kind of go through their findings, the different vegetation they saw on site under that habitat inventory paragraph. And then the second part of that, they do go through the different wildlife that was observed out there. I am not sure what criteria they were going off of when they went through and documented all of that. I don't know if they were going off state guidelines or local guidelines there.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from commission members? I guess I just had one more, and I realized that the future park, is in the next phase, if I have that correct. I'm just wondering what the vision is for the type of park that would be.
So we are moving the park that is adjacent to the rec path into phase 1. So that is a change that's
okay.
not currently on the plans. And so we are going to be developing a plan that earlier, in the very short term to go there. And really we're thinking it's more, I sort of think about the in downtown Burlington, Andy and Dan and I were talking about yesterday, like, you know, you have those fitness stops. Maybe it's not fitness stops everywhere, but maybe it's more like there's a couple of definitely some benches and some seats, but then there's like some little you know, structures that you can use to, you know, swing off of or whatever. We're not envisioning a full-on, you know, swing set playgrounds sort of section in there. It just seems like it's a kind of an odd location to have some of that because of the walking distance to them. So, you know, that was our idea, and we were going to work with the landscape designer on that.
Okay, thanks. So it'd be mostly a you know, generally speaking, a mowed lawn area with green space with constructed. Okay.
That's correct. Seating, benches, areas. I mean, we've talked about maybe putting in, you know, a gazebo or some sort of like roof, you know, little section. People can go there and hang out.
And that was some feedback we received from the hack, was possibly a gazebo. They mentioned pavilion, but it seemed like that area would be too small for a pavilion. But as Chris said, seating, benches, potentially gazebo, and we're working with the hack on that as well.
Are you anticipating the public art being in this park, or would it be elsewhere? Do you know?
We assume that it's going to be some sort of structures, you know, and there'll be some within the park. There'll probably be some along the rec path, you know, combination of a couple of different areas.
All right, thanks. If there aren't any other questions, let's transition over to the findings and recommendations.
So I just had one comment, and I was just thinking it afterwards about the mowing in the areas that were going to be left. If there could be something put in there that the mowing wouldn't happen till like August or September, that would be helpful to any grassland birds if they do nest there.
So this would be for which? This would be in for the wetland area.
Not the wetland, but if there's any areas left, and of course I don't have the map in front of me, but if there were places on the development that were left to a field, I don't know if it's all being built out, but if there was any, might be no area left that's mowable and outside of the wetland buffer. But just a note that if they waited till after, August or September to mow, that would be helpful if there were any grassland birds there. But
So
it looks like it's.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding of this is that it is sort of generally being developed, and whilst there are some gaps like here, those are actually, I think, stormwater ponds.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's sort of the public park over here, and then I think in phase 2 you're also going to have your neighborhood green over here.
To the right of that, Simon, behind that row of houses, there's an area that is additional. There, the 150-foot buffer from the Allen Brook goes so far, but there's some area that's not being developed. Is that mostly wetlands? Is that why there's not many houses?
It's forested there, I think, Terry.
Forest, okay.
The purple hatch
And
shows the current forestation, and then the little scallops. They're kind of hard to see. I don't know, Simon, if you can highlight. Yeah, so there's the current forestation, and here's the proposed tree line. Those scallops.
So that's
Okay,
the
so-
proposed tree
and-
line, I think.
Just so you know too, that
There-
there's this slope there too from that line down. It's a
yeah, and there is a stormwater area back there as well. That's
is it?
another stormwater management
Okay.
area.
Okay, so it
Yeah, so
doesn't apply to this project, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like the grasslands are pretty much consumed with the structures.
Okay, thanks.
So, shall I bring up the?
Yeah, once you, can you, Simon, can you pull up the findings and recommendations?
Yeah. So does anyone have any comments on the findings? Shout out if you do.
So I guess my one comment is you mentioned that you are still waiting for that functional assessment to come in for the class 2 wetlands. Trying to figure out how to handle that. I guess if the applicant can get that to you, Simon, as soon as possible, we can circulate it if to the rest of the commission if something does come up in there.
Yeah.
If I'm not really expecting anything, but you never know. That'll be helpful.
Yeah, we'll certainly forward that functional assessment once that's received.
Thank
Really,
you.
my concern is that there's a lot of impervious area going into this. It is now a field that soaks up a lot of water. So I guess, you know, from my perspective, generally speaking, anything that can be done to reduce runoff from this parcel into Allen Brook would be appreciated, you know, above and beyond whatever you anticipated with the water or the ground wetlands.
Yeah,
Those areas
so
also.
the stormwater management areas, the area draining to Allen Brook is over 10 square miles, which the state allows you to do a 100-year waiver for the 100-year storm requirement. So you don't need to detain it if the receiving water is over 10 square miles. We are detaining that 100-year storm event. So we are not seeking the waiver. Those areas have been designed for the 100-year storm event going to Allen Brook.
Great, that's good to know. Thank you.
Eric, I have a question that your question about the class 3 brings up.
Yep.
And that is just, are there going to be basements on the units across the southern border through that class 3 area? What type of, are they going to be on basements or just on, my brain isn't working this morning.
So on the southern end of the street is going to be basements. So in the what we call front loading townhomes, those are basements, and
Okay.
then the units, the types of homes in the center core there, those are actually slab on grade with the garages at the first level.
Okay, yeah, the one basements may be challenging in the area that's currently mapped as class 3, and I own a property just south of this that used to be a class 3, and there's a lot of problems even with homes that have sump pumps. It's just something to be aware of.
Yep, thank you.
All right, so Simon, I see you've got recommendation 1 highlighted here.
Yeah, so that was just an option for people, you know, writing this. Don't know if the commission has any views on that issue. For context, I don't know how much people are aware of this, but when homes are close to the buffer, we do end up sort of, once people move in, getting sort of repeated requests to take down trees that are within striking distance of the home. So I mean, it will be, I guess it will be slightly lessened by the fact that these footprints account for sort of the deck and stairs, which I wasn't aware of when I drafted this. And so, you know, on other applications, we have had sort of conditions where if you do, if it is necessary to go into the buffer to take out trees, they sort of need to be replanted as required. But that would require an administrative permit.
So, Commissioner members, what are we thinking on this one? This kind of speaks to my questions earlier about where the tree line will be on the off of the backside of Bellevue Lane. I guess the east side of Bellevue, I see now that the 150-foot setback is well away from that east side. So I guess, if this comes up in the future, I'll see the 2 feet gray there, but I guess I feel okay with that happening. Dangerous trees need to be removed from that area. I'm wondering more about the north side of Bellevue Lane.
Yeah, it looked like the conflict was along that north boundary.
Particularly for unit 9, where the footprint, I guess, would be probably the deck might be right up against the tree line.
So are you asking us what are?
I'm asking the commission members if they have any
Oh,
concerns
okay.
about or preferences for what Simon has proposed for recommendation 1. I'm not all that concerned about about the potential for for tree removal on the east, the carriage homes on the east side of Woodry Lane. It seems like that's a pretty good distance from the 150-foot buffer. But I guess the townhomes and that one carriage home on the north side of Woodry Lane are right up against the tree line there. Which, as far as I can tell, is more or less the 150-foot buffer. They're actually very close to it.
Yeah, on the north side of Beaudry Lane is that 150-foot buffer that tree line is going to be following.
Is there any problem during construction to take out especially large ash trees along that, or does that also require a special permit?
I don't know. That's a good. I don't know, Simon, if you have an answer for that one.
I don't have the answer to that one. I don't think ash trees are singled out as requiring a special permit for removal in any of our bylaws. They would be entitled to clear trees necessary to implement the development.
Even within that buffer?
Not within the buffer, I don't believe.
Oh, I'm just saying if there is I was just thinking it would be much easier to remove any large ash trees that will almost certainly die anyway, that are right at the buffer, to keep them from hitting decks or stairs or houses, that's all.
Right. Okay. So before they get sort of infested and become a problem, do we take them out now, given we know they're going to die in the next 3 years or whatever anyway?
Yeah, instead of having after completion, because then it becomes a headache for the homeowners association. That's all I was thinking.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to capture that in a recommendation.
That actually makes sense to me. I would propose something like ash trees, large ash trees along the north side of Bellevue Lane be considered for removal during construction. And that'll be 3 units. 1 through 9, I guess. Just to eliminate that potential conflict in the future. It's really hard to tell just from looking at these flats where what the fall line of trees might be.
Right. Does that make sense to you, Chris, that you would do that?
Yes, it does. And we do get complaints about those, and it's the big tree on the edge that we're not allowed to touch that ends up becoming the piece that the homeowners association is challenged with dealing with after the fact. So if we can say, you know, we could have an engineer, you know, we could, if there was an ash tree that was along the buffer line within, maybe if you said like within 10 feet of the buffer line, then you remove it, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. Because yeah, it makes a lot more sense to me to remove them during the construction phase rather than make the homeowner or homeowners association have to do it once the homes are built, and then it gets a lot more expensive too.
Yeah,
exactly. So we could also put a DBH in there as well. Whatever people think is. So can we see the recommendations again, Simon, so we can just look at that and draft it?
Yeah, I just emailed you. There's no one coming in, so I think you can shut it down.
How about before the any tree removed, we say during construction, any ash tree within 10 feet of the buffer line, and I guess we could put a DBH in there if Kim thinks that makes sense.
I think I'm gonna abstain because I just, like, from a professional standpoint, fundamentally disagree with the systematic removal of ash trees in this way, which I think I've said in Conservation Commission meetings a whole bunch. And like, I have 2 huge ash in my front yard and I'm not taking them off. So I think I've like Gary and I have both made this clear that like, we don't think that this is why Ethan's treating ash in Catamount, right? Because they serve an important ecological function and they're treatable, and some may be resistant. And so but I know that that's not the direction the town is going in terms of managing. So I'll just abstain from the conversation. I also don't think that like setting a DBH is like a small tree can still damage a roof.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's probably, I mean, we could decide based on, you know, what you and Gary, you know, what your opinions are, that we just don't put that in. So we could just.
Well,
leave
I
it
think
at
it's just like, it's a disagreement within it's a broader disagreement than just this, right? Like, I don't need to like co-opt this particular site plan with like this bigger philosophical forestry disagreement that exists between like me and the way the town has chosen to manage for ash. So like, I think this is consistent with the rest of the way Williston is managing for ash in non-forest settings. So it's just a difference in management preferences. So do you know what I mean? Like, I can just abstain. I do think it would be great if we were like replacing trees. If we're going to remove them, it'd be cool if which Burlington is doing, and I think that's a great example, but yeah.
With a different species, right?
Yeah, correct. And I know Williston somebody has said in the past, like, oh, we couldn't figure out how to do it with like all the underground utilities, but like, I just feel like if Burlington can do it in on their street trees with all the underground utilities.
Well, there shouldn't be any underground utilities in the
right, in this
buffer.
location, there should not be, yeah.
So, you know, essentially, I think what we're saying is that, which is, you know, if you are going to go in there and take out trees, they do have to be replaced, and that would be binding on the development.
Hmm.
Yeah, the section that is highlighted, I think is a very appropriate way to address the outliers needing to remove something after construction. The portion about ash trees in the buffer, I just don't see a clean way how to.
So, yeah, I also about that too. Sorry to interrupt you. I guess one way to phrase it would be any any ash tree located in the watershed protection buffer that is within striking distance of the proposed structures located at sites 1 through 9 may be removed, and any place with a tree species native to Williston.
Mhm. I missed the last part of that, Eric. During his,
The and then replace with a tree species that is native to Williston. That's the
Yeah.
last part.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I can make a motion now to say that during construction, any ash tree within striking distance of units 1 through 9 can be removed. Or don't put shall be, because that means it should be, can be removed as long as it's replaced by planting a native tree. And it, yeah. Yeah. Eric, is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, more or less. And Simon, I just dropped what I was thinking into the chat too. If you could
Okay.
delete that.
So I think what we're talking about here is the Allenbrook protection buffer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, okay. Okay. Well, I'll make a motion to add the sentence as written.
Well,
Uh,
Laura, let's just, instead of having multiple motions on this one
Okay.
findings of recs, let's just do one at the end to approve unless.
Oh, makes sense. Okay, thanks.
So Chris, is that something that you have any comments on before we move on?
No, no comments.
All right. Thanks for working through that. Questions or comments on recommendation 2?
Do we typically include trees as an acceptable demarcation because they're much more easily cut down than removing a? It's harder to notice a tree being cut down, I feel like, than fences and boulders, but I can't remember whether we have had that in the past.
We do.
Yeah,
do it.
I feel like, you know, if it's an actual forested tree line, I feel like that's especially if it's on a parcel that can be managed by a homeowners association rather than an individual. I feel like that's okay.
Okay.
In my mind, it's more permanent than a split rail fence, which will rot in 20 years or whatever, fall down and may or may not be replaced. Boulders are, I think,
Fair enough.
longest lasting and most permanent, but I'm okay with these. Okay, recommendation 3, questions or comments? Oh, this reminds me, I did have a question for the applicants, and I noticed in your responses to the pre-app comments.
Simon, can you scroll to the section comparing pre-app?
Page 3.
Yeah.
The box, the top box there on page 3, where actually it's the bottom of page 2, but the Conservation Commission had a comment to request that signage should be posted along the tree lines when the front public about the buffer and its purpose. Response from the applicant was that there do not appear to be any details on signage for the buffer. So you're looking for language from us? Is that the idea there?
Well, just, is there a sign that you like to see, with specific wording? Just, is there a consistent sign that you have required in other locations that we should use?
So is that sign that you have on the screen there, Simon? Is that
Yeah, it's something that we're looking to start doing, to start educating people about why these buffers are provided, and explain to them, the purpose of what's happening.
And
So
can
we
we
can-
provide that to the applicant?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I missed out in our conversation earlier. All right, any other questions on recommendation 3? All right, questions on recommendation 4 on the state wetlands permit? And then Simon's got number 5 highlighted here, provide a current functional assessment of constitute wetlands on the property, so that is forthcoming and will be provided to the town and the conservation commission in the near future. Your this proposal is going to the PRB, what did I say, July 26th or something like that.
Correct.
So we'll have that before the DRB meeting.
We assume so. The work has actually already been done. We just need to get the report, and the gentleman is on vacation and not available until July 15th. So we've been chasing him like a hawk, but not to no avail.
Okay. So we meet, the Conservation Commission meets again on the 20th. So if it's possible to get it before that, so we can just take a quick look at it, that would be good. And then we can have that.
Okay.
Other questions or concerns about number 5? All right, and then number 6, final plans shall show full compliance with 29.5. What which bylaw is that one?
Yeah, I could clarify that. That's the erosion control part of the bylaw.
Great, yeah, if you could, yeah, just add the,
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
just add
bylaws.
the sort of generic heading.
yeah, thanks. For those of us that don't have the bylaw numbers memorized.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful. And then number 7, featuring the Adirondack views where they exist. All right, great, thank you.
I'd like to propose adding a recommendation, Eric.
Yep.
Before I ask for that, Terry, you were expressing concern about the upkeep of birdhouses, but knowing that a homeowners association is going to be managing the property as opposed to individual homeowners, how do you feel about recommending that bird boxes be, that the development be outfitted with bird boxes, and that the homeowners association be tasked with the maintenance of those?
I think that's a good idea, because it's a great idea to start out and put those bird boxes up, but for them to be effective, they do need to be maintained at least once a year. And I would offer to help them manage them if they needed some help too. And there's also Audubon, Vermont, which is right in Huntington.
Yeah, my thought is if they exist, it's a lot more likely that habitat will be provided. If they don't exist, the likelihood that the association will independently install them is very, very low. So
That's a good idea.
So with that, I'd like to add a recommendation or propose a recommendation that bird and bat boxes for habitat as recommended by the wildlife habitat assessment shall be installed along buffers. To be maintained by the homeowners association. That would, I guess, go in probably in the declaration for the homeowners association that those are part of the common elements to be maintained by the association.
I know that houses have specific requirements as to which direction they're facing. So I'm wondering if bat boxes should not be included in this. Unless you know what the recommendations are. I mean, they have to be facing a certain direction and they have to be a certain height.
Mostly to the east, just so they don't get baked. You know, you don't want to put the entrance to birdhouse to the south and have a constant hit of the sun on the bird box. So most of the recommendations are to the east or south, northeast.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the bat boxes.
Yeah,
They-
I don't know. Yeah.
Chris and Dan, would you guys be comfortable if we just said recommended that? Let's see, who did your assessment? That was.
It was Eric with our office.
Okay, yeah.
So, Reed, I was just looking at it here. The habitat disturbance assessment didn't find any evidence of bats. It was more bird boxes, sorry, birds. And the
Yeah, I think
recommendations
just bird
follows
boxes
that.
would be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's bats there.
Yeah, I would imagine the bats are most likely in the forested area. If I were, I'm not an expert in bats, but my guess is that they're more likely to be present in the forested area, which is being much less impacted than the open area. And the fringe habitat, which I imagine the birds are likely to be using. So Terry, you'd know more, and Laura about that, but it seems to me like the bird habitat is more of a concern for this parcel.
I think so.
I agree, Reed. I know that in one of the webinars I watched, they said that when you're cutting down trees, if you leave a 10-foot tall base, so that's what bats prefer. So I think anything that's broken off in the woods would be what a bat would prefer.
Any questions or comments about number 8 that I've asked be added?
No.
All right, thanks, Reed. Any other questions or comments on the recommendations as proposed, or anything else that commission members think we're missing? All right, anything else on this project?
No,
All right. Yep.
I can make a motion that the recommendations, as we've changed them, be accepted by the Williston Conservation Commission.
All right, so recommendations as amended, motion to accept by Laura. We have a second.
I have one question, that number 5, can we vote on it before we get that information?
That's a good question, Terry.
Since we don't know the answer to
We
it.
could perhaps do a friendly amendment to Laura's motion, pending the outcome of the Class 3 wetland functional assessment.
Mm.
And that'll
Yeah,
come.
we could
hopefully
reconfirm on the 20th.
Mhm.
That work for you, Laura?
Oh, yeah, that's great.
I'll
Simon, can you
second.
read what you have so that I can be clear on what the full motion is?
The motion is the recommendations. I guess we'd have to write something in here about that coming back. Maybe in the, I mean, the findings seem fine. So I guess we can write something.
Well, I think let me try to summarize and tell me if this is what you were thinking, Laura. Something like motion to approve the recommendations as amended and pending receipt or review of the final of the class 3 wetland functional assessment.
Yep, perfect.
Functional assessment of the class 3 wetlands.
All right. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second on the motion as provided, as written?
I'll second.
Thanks, Barry. Any further discussion on the motion? All right. Call for votes for in favor of the motion.
Aye.
Aye, Laura.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? And abstentions?
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay, thanks, Tim. All right, motion
Alex,
carries.
I didn't catch that. Did you vote in favor?
So we had, yes,
Yeah, okay.
we had 6 votes in favor and then 1 abstention from Tim.
Four votes in favor.
Four, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, I was thinking that the
Yeah.
full commission was here.
Okay, great.
All right, thanks, Chris and Dan. It's a big project, spent a lot of time on it. But
Thank you all very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for your
Have a great
time.
day.
Appreciate it.
All right, so that puts us a little bit behind schedule here. But our next agenda item is changes the current use category. Simon, what were you thinking here for this agenda item?
I mean, I think it's just a general discussion about what what people think and what the potential implications are. Maybe like what are people's initial thoughts about if there's anything we can do to promote this, and what else we can do. Is this something like current use is referenced in the current town plan? Is that something we need to think about when we're drafting the chapters forthcoming? There's not going to be a lot of people in Williston who this is going to affect, but it's even if we get one, that's pretty big. So
I'm sorry, I missed what we're talking about.
The recent changes to current use to allow for
Okay.
more hands-off management to sort of count towards the allowed uses.
That includes forest land.
Carbon sequestration option.
Yeah, this would
Yeah.
have been a good one to ask Ethan about.
There's
I thought about
actually
that, but I didn't
no
want to keep him
carbon.
around for this long.
There's actually no carbon accounting. So that I think carbon sequestration was the motivation for the change, but it's not.
It's old forest conditions is what it says in it, or
Right. There's no
it-
explicit carbon. I think
It
it was
says-
the motivation, but you don't actually have to demonstrate sequestration of carbon in in the sense of carbon accounting.
it says the change to UVA values and this change to UVA values and accelerates the development of old forest conditions in a pattern and at a scale that we would benefit from and are sorely lacking in our landscape.
I think it possibly could draw more people into the program. I know of at least 2 people that are reluctant to go into current use because of the requirement of having some kind of a management plan, which includes logging.
They'll
So I think in
still have
Williston,
to
it
have a
might be-
management plan.
But it wouldn't require harvesting timber.
I think one thing we could think about is so Ethan and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago because I'm trying to understand what the impact of this on the county foresters is going to be. And it does sound like potentially there is he said he's been fielding a lot of calls for people that maybe didn't quite wrap their heads around the I'm sorry. She's trying to show you all this ring that she got from the
Nice
bookmobile. That didn't quite understand like how it was going to work, and that it wasn't sort of just going to be like, oh, now you can enroll and potentially do nothing. And there are still bars that you have to meet, and you still have to have a management plan that's signed off by the county forester. And so if the example that he gave me is like, if you have a property and you have been reluctant to enroll because you don't want to harvest any trees and your property is riddled with invasives, you're not, for example, going to be able to enroll, have a management plan where you do nothing and get the benefit. Like you would still have to address those invasives and harvest them. And so I think maybe we could talk with him about like an outreach, or at least doing a presentation for us about like what it's going to mean and who would be, your ring is on your toe, that's cool, and like who would potentially be able to enroll now, and like how much flexibility those landowners would have versus what they previously had. Because I think that there's maybe a public perception that it means like, oh, I've been reluctant to enroll because I don't want to see anything cut, and now I can do that. And it's not totally, it's more nuanced than that.
I really like the idea, Kim, of having an educational event, both for us, but also inviting the public and asking Ethan to address some of those issues in more layman's terms. Obviously, they've done from these links that were in the for this agenda item, there's a lot of information out there, but I think there's also some misinformation or misunderstandings about it.
Yeah.
And
there's also a bar that you have to meet in terms of like the integrity and quality of your forest in order to meet this new standard. So it's, I don't know, it might even be like a cool mapping project for a college student. Like if I have, trying to think if I have any students that need like we have a GIS minor and they have to do like individual projects to get that minor. If we could like have somebody map the properties that would meet that bar.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, is whether you could at least do somebody could do a first pass of these are the properties that seem like they might qualify based on the size and level of forestation. And then outreach could be done to those property owners to invite them to consider it or to offer to help get them the information that they would need to determine whether they want to enroll.
Yeah. I do think it's great, Simon, that we're being proactive and having a conversation about it, because it does have real implications for the town. Yes, a squirrel. And then I think like more broadly for us to think about is like the county foresters already have a lot of paperwork, like so much of their job is paperwork. And so, and our county forester is perhaps like the most active, most overworked county forester. So like what might it mean for his time and availability on other, maybe just thinking about like the things we ask him for as his job is in the polls on his time are in flux.
Is there somebody from Agency of Natural Resources we could invite to not draw more on Ethan's time?
I think he's still the best person for this. I don't think it's like I think it's just more like just being aware that they're already asked to do a lot, and this is a big change, and they might be asked to do more now.
Yeah, there was a name on the main sort of Vermont webpage.
Yeah, that's Keith
Um,
Thompson.
Might be able to come and give us a presentation on it.
I mean, it would be real cool if Mike Snyder wanted to come give us a presentation on it, but he might be the busiest of the busy.
I saw the name Keith Thompson.
Keith Thompson, yeah.
Yeah, he's our former county forester.
Yeah. And Mike was the previous Chittenden County forester, and he's now like, you know, the top of the top. But he would also have like a good, I don't know, like high level perspective on the state's thinking and et cetera.
Mike would, yeah, I agree with him, but he might not be as down in the weeds, so to speak, as Keith or Ethan.
Right. I doubt he's available.
And then there's that. Yeah. And I guess another question I have is so that it's nice to see that they reference invasive plant control. I haven't like gotten into to really understand to what extent that's required. I'm just thinking about the prevalence of buckthorn in Williston's forests anyway. What's the expectation of managing buckthorn and as Ethan mentioned, Japanese barberry and stuff.
Yeah, and I think this is actually one of like the things that might be like a rub point, which is that like I think there might be a perception that you can just not cut anything, right? But actually, if you have buckthorn, you need it under this, you would need to cut it. So there's like this.
How about Tony, do you,
I'm sorry, you cut out.
Would Tony D'Amato be another person to bring in to talk to us about it?
I don't. I guess like, hey, can you guys leave the office, please? My gut would be no, that like this is really very like legislative and applied, and that he's like a research silviculturalist. But I don't know. I did have a conversation with him about it like maybe a month ago, and he wasn't like uninformed. It's just not like it's just not his everyday work, you know.
Yep.
It would, I guess, like Eric, it would be like maybe asking you to come in and talk about like a legislation about like farm runoff or something, where like, yeah, you could do it, but
eventually it will affect everybody, all the people in forestry?
I mean, in the sense that all the forests are connected and have implications for each other, right? But I think like the people that are going to be like the most directly affected are homeowners that might qualify. And I think one important thing is that like the estimate is that of folks that qualify under this new allowance, probably about a third of them are already in current use, but are in current use under other allowances, so that like maybe they would shift categories. It will definitely affect everybody who's a practicing forester, anyone who's like writing management plans and signing off on management plans. This is going to impact. And then I think like for researchers, like it's only going to affect us if we are interested in understanding the implications of it or how it intersects with our research. So certainly you could be like, you know, a researcher who's looking at the restoration of American chestnut and maybe not pay attention to this very much at all. If it's not, you know, like if you're like looking at things at a genetic level and not worrying about the landscape, or like not looking at things at a landscape scale, probably everyone's worried about the landscape. I'm sure someone's going to watch this recording and take issue with what I just said. And then I think for municipalities or for like conservation commissions like us, the biggest implication is like, okay, what does it mean in terms of more of our landscape enrolled and how that landscape is getting managed differently and what that means in the broader context, right? Like, what does that mean across all of our forested landscape? And then what does it mean for like the people that we work with who may have more demand on their time? So like both county and private practicing foresters that we might be, interfacing with who now have like a bigger burden of paperwork. And then I don't know what the tax implications are for the town. Maybe Simon knows the answer to that, but I don't know if there are any. I think like the state pays the town back for the lost taxes, right?
I think so,
So
yeah.
I think it's really just like, is this a strategy on our end? Is this a strategy for more land to have a management plan on it? And does it create a burden on people that we already work with such that like maybe they need more support? Like maybe Ethan needs us to do more outreach as a conservation commission because his paperwork, I'm making this up. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, okay, so perhaps for a future meeting, we can recruit Ethan back to the meeting room, or Keith Robinson is identified, or Keith Thompson is identified as the point of contact on those.
I think maybe, can I suggest, maybe if I reach out to Keith Thompson,
Yeah.
Yeah.
copying Ethan, so he knows what we're doing.
Yeah, I think just saying we would like to do public outreach, and we need to understand the best way to do that is, are there events that are already planned through natural resources through the department, or maybe Ethan already has asks from others about it and we can piggyback. I think that's the best way to not put added stress on those practicing foresters. Yeah.
Which like maybe is not an issue. I'm just saying that it might be an issue.
It could be.
Right. Because current use is already like the thing that I hear a lot is like that there's already so much paperwork associated with it. And so I'm sort of I'm extrapolating a little bit that like, oh,
You're
maybe
talking
we should worry about it, or we should just watch it.
that the paperwork is through the state. I mean, as a homeowner, there's not a lot of.
No, I mean that the amount of paperwork that county foresters do is already like a significant portion. Current use already is a significant portion of their job. And like, for example, this is not Ethan, Bill Gunther, who retired a few years ago, like basically got to the point where he felt like I'm doing way more of this than I ever thought that I would do. And it's like a significant portion of my job that I'm like very dissatisfied with.
All right, so
It would be great to see if Ethan could come back and speak either to a group of towns. I know it sounds like he doesn't have many other meetings at 7 a.m. So our meetings are fairly easy, but he's very busy, like Kim said. So.
Yeah, the other thing is that, final details from what I've read, Kim, haven't been worked out, and they're not going to be worked out until like the final
Correct.
draft is December
Right.
31st.
Right. We won't really know till January.
So does it make sense to, put it off until we know that, and until we know what outreach that Forest Parks and Recreation are also having around current use?
I think Simon's like, let's reach out to Keith, even just say like, hey, we recognize that there's changes and that like Forest Parks and Rec owes the final draft to the legislature later, and that you're probably planning outreach, but like, we just want to get on your radar that Williston is interested in understanding the implications of this. And whenever you do outreach, if you're planning something in Chittenden County, we'd love to be involved, or like, I don't know, something like
Yeah,
that.
great idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
And another approach, or a second approach, could be to reach out to Chittenden County RPC as well, and maybe they're looking at this too, and they could do something for a countywide informational learning session for the town, for the family. Okay, well, we can talk about that, Simon, next
Yeah.
week perhaps. All right. So in the other business, we're pretty much out of time here, but you had the link vote correspondence. That was just an FYI for commission members. If people want to sign off or submit, what was it, to sign the petition, then they can do that. The information to do that is in that link that was provided, right?
That's
Correct.
Anything else on the lake vote?
No,
Anything else for today? All right. Great. Thanks, everyone. Laura and Simon, I'll see you on Monday.
Yeah.
And,
thank you, Eric.
Okay.
Rest of you. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Hi,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everybody. Bye.